It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call shots. How are you feeling right now?
I don't know, honestly.
Are you confused? Are you emotionally confused?
Yes.
So we just got done watching the final arc of the Clone Wars, which you can probably assume if you're listening to this. This, by the way, is Shots, our film and TV review podcast. Man, we literally just got done watching this final arc here. The series finale, really, of the show. The final episode of the show. And I don't know how to feel, man.
It was a roller coaster of emotions.
It really was. I feel emotional. I feel it was a satisfying ending, though. I will say that. We're gonna get into it. We're gonna deep dive into it. I'm just, as always, I'm gonna issue right here at the top spoiler warning. If you've not watched this, the Clone Wars season 7, if you've not watched this finale, you are not going to want to listen to this if you don't want to get spoiled. So go watch it, come back and hang out with us and talk about it with us. But just, we have a lot to talk about here. I think a lot of people, when they were talking about this season, a lot of fans' complaints were, well, they just kind of put all the story in these last 4 episodes. And in a way, that isn't wrong. I still found the season itself to be enjoyable. I think once we're done talking about these 4 episodes, I think we just need to reflect on the season itself. And really the show itself, because this was the finale of the show. But for these 4 episodes specifically, what are your thoughts?
Damn, it was good. Damn,
it was good. It was very good.
There's so many just moments. I was just like, I think both of us were just like, you shit. I remember you. Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah, dude. There's several oh shit moments.
Yeah.
Throughout the course of these 4 episodes. These 4 episodes do not play. They ain't playing no games.
It goes balls to the wall in these last 4 episodes. Balls to the wall.
Very much so. There is these 4 episodes fulfill, I think, the promise of the show. What we sort of have always wanted from the show.
Yes.
Which is like, essentially, this show's job was to fill in that gap between episodes 2 and 3, right? And I mean, that is what
it does. That and more.
It absolutely does that and more. And I want to talk about a bunch of stuff. Let's dig into these 4 episodes, and then I think there's a really interesting conversation to have even after talking about the content of these 4 episodes, because I'm really curious as to what you think about what can happen next, because there's going to be more animated Star Wars content. But anyway, just let's get into this. Let's dig into these episodes and just the content. I've got my notes here. As you heard me furiously notes.
Typing multiple times.
Especially when something happens, just something crazy's happening.
It was just like, oh shit.
So just right out the bat, though, I wanted to just shout out here. My very first note is just to talk about how cool it is that it opens with that old Lucasfilm logo. It's a total, and they totally did that on purpose. Like, it totally harkens back to when the show began, I mean, this show, a lot of people grew up with this show. And this show holds a really special place in my heart. And it represents, I think, a bygone era of Star Wars. And returning to this season kind of took me back to that place, that mid-2000s place of Star Wars. And what a lot of people don't realize, because where we're at with Star Wars right now, there's all kinds of Star Wars content, right? We're flush with Star Wars content. It was not always like that. Like, this show really was like the only Star Wars content we got for years. So, I mean, this was a treat to watch every week.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the episodes, this whole arc is cut into parts, obviously, but even in the opening credits, it acknowledges that. It's like, it treats this as one big thing, basically, like 4 parts of one episode.
Yeah. I think you even said that, like, more than likely somebody's going to mash that shit up.
Oh, yeah, this thing just is begging to be. I could literally see them putting this all together and just releasing it in theaters. They could totally do that. Like, you could have done that. I mean, obviously we're in the Corona times right now, so nobody's going to any theaters. But if that weren't the case, I mean, you could totally imagine being in a movie theater and watching it. It played out like it was a feature. It had a start, a middle, and an end. It felt like a movie,
mm-hmm.
and it was treated with the respect that a movie gets. So I thought that was really cool. The 4 episodes, the 4 parts of this are called, so part 1, Old Friends Not Forgotten, part 2, The Phantom Apprentice, part 3, Shattered, and part 4, Victory and Death. So yeah, let's get into it, man. Starting off with the first episode, it opens up with kind of a fun scene. It's a battle that's happening on a bridge with Obi-Wan and Cody and his troops. And they're fighting against some separatist droids. Anakin kind of pops in. Yeah, after Obi-Wan kind of like pops in, they feel like they're outnumbered. And Obi-Wan's like hiding.
Mm-hmm.
Anakin pops in. He's like, "What are you hiding for?"
I love just the badass, like, little bit of a Matrix dodge, little like sidestep. Like,
yes,
so good.
And it was just funny. Just even the writing, like the sort of like Anakin's like, there's only like 1,000 tops. He's like, we could take these fuckers out. So anyway, Anakin has this plan where he essentially starts to approach these droids, and he's basically pretending to surrender, and the droids are like buying it.
Yeah.
He's like, get your leader, I'm surrendering, basically, and all the while we see that Rex and R2 and the 501st are just underneath the bridge, ready to ambush. Mm-hmm. And the second that they're like, the droids at first are like, well, it seems legit.
Yeah, the tactical droid actually comes up. He's like, why did you cease fire?
He's like, you idiots.
It's like, it's a trap, you fools.
And that's when the fucking 501st come in and just dispatch them all, obviously. This was the first kind of like little nerdy Star Wars lore nugget that I pulled out, though, was that we get a message there saying that, name dropping Fulcrum.
Mm-hmm.
Saying like, oh, like, I don't remember the exact quote, but they say something to the effect of like, oh no, but it's Fulcrum, but it's not Guerrera.
Mm-hmm.
Guerrera, of course, referring to Saw Gerrera. Jin! We've deception. Yeah. Referring to Saw Gerrera, and it's interesting because we sort of, spoilers if you haven't seen Star Wars Rebels, but the character of Fulcrum is a big deal in Star Wars Rebels before it is revealed to be Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
Because we go a long time in Rebels without ever seeing Ahsoka, and there's this like kind of mysterious Fulcrum character, and now we've learned that Saw Gerrera once went under the moniker of Fulcrum. Mm-hmm. And when Anakin is called to meet Fulcrum here, and they go into this sort of they see on the holo communication there, it's Ahsoka and it's Bo-Katan, and it's so this is kind of the first instance of Ahsoka kind of using the code name Fulcrum. So that was cool.
It genuinely made me sad.
What?
Just how happy Anakin was.
He was just so how happy he was to see her.
Mm-hmm.
But it was almost like a weird like breakup thing where he was happy to see her and she's like, no time.
It was more so of just trying to stay professional.
She was trying to stay professional.
I truly do feel like they would have talked if shit didn't happen.
She still definitely cares.
Yeah.
But I think she was kind of like, it felt like the kind of like, yeah, I'm good, whatever. We need to get this going.
Mm-hmm.
But Anakin wanted to spend some time with her and catch up and stuff like that. But anyway, the TLDR version is And we sort of saw this kind of bumping up against the last arc leading into this. Her and Bo-Katan are saying like, hey, like we've located Maul. He's on Mandalore. We want to take Mandalore back, right? And capture Maul. And they're trying to basically get the help of the Republic in this. And it's actually not long after that they're talking to Obi-Wan and Anakin and everybody in person. And what essentially happens is Obi-Wan's like, I don't know if the council's going to go for this. I'll talk to them. I'll ask them, but I don't know how much is going to happen. By the way, as always, Todd, stop me if I'm forgetting something.
Of course.
But Bo-Katan essentially uses Satine's death.
Mm-hmm.
Satine, of course, being her sister and Obi-Wan's ex-lover, essentially before Maul killed her.
But if I remember correctly, wasn't she involved with that? Technically,
is that a thing?
Like she was technically working with the motherfucker that was working with Maul, wasn't she?
Yeah, I think that is right.
So it's like, bitch.
She's a little, well, yeah, because there's all this animosity between them, or there was all this animosity between them, and that actually even comes up a few times in these episodes where it's like, you know, I'm not the leader. My sister was. My sister had all these rules and this, that, and the other. But essentially, Bo-Katan's like, well, like what the fuck? Like this is the guy that killed my sister. Like, I thought you would care about that. I thought you would want to see this motherfucker captured. And he's like, well, yeah, I do, but, like, we got to go about this the right way, kind of thing. So she was basically trying to get him to join up without asking the council first. I remember when she first kind of met you were just like, bitch. But anyway, Anakin and Ahsoka kind of break off. And Anakin's like, hey, I have a surprise for you. And again, they're still trying to catch up, and she's still kind of giving him the cold shoulder a little bit, kind of like, yeah, there's no time, blah, blah, blah. He wants to give her a surprise. They start talking about, why are the clones saluting me? You know, because there's clones in the hallways as they're walking, and they're still saluting Ahsoka. And he's like, well, yeah, you might not be in the Republic anymore. You might not be a Jedi anymore. But they still respect you.
Talking about that loyalty.
Yeah, loyalty means everything to the clones. And you open up the big blast doors, and there's the entire 501st, and they've all repainted their helmets, which is what we've seen. We saw it on the key art when they first revealed that it was coming back. They repainted their helmets to look like Ahsoka's, Ahsoka's kind of like, I guess, face markings.
Yeah.
So there's another moment where Anakin's like, I have another surprise for you or whatever, and that's when Obi-Wan Anakin pulls out a box. And it's obvious kind of what's in it. You're like, okay, that probably has lightsabers in it. But they're interrupted because Obi-Wan bursts through and says, hey, Grievous is attacking Coruscant, and Anakin this is sort of leading into the beginning of episode 3, yeah. Anakin, of course, is worried about the Chancellor, and they're like, we gotta go rescue the Chancellor, right? And Ahsoka immediately is like calling out Obi-Wan because she's like, what the fuck, dude? Like, you're abandoning the Mandalore thing. You know, this is so typical of like the Jedi, basically. Like you just doing this as a political play. You give a shit about the Chancellor because you want to have the Chancellor in your pocket. That's all you care about.
And then Anakin comes up with a compromise.
The compromise he comes up with, he's like, hey, why don't Ahsoka can lead the 501st, and Obi-Wan's like, no, Ahsoka's not in the Republic anymore, blah, blah, blah. And then Anakin's like, well, what if we make Rex the commander of the 501st and, make Ahsoka his advisor? Mm-hmm. So anyway, Obi-Wan agrees to that, and Anakin finally has the chance to give her 2 sabers. Now, there's a little bit of confusion about this because the sabers he gives her are blue. Mm-hmm. Right, they are her sabers, but they've basically been repaired and modified or whatever. When we catch up with her in Rebels, they're white.
So here's the deal. I think if I remember correctly, she technically got like red kyber crystals from one of the Inquisitors,
right?
And healed those and made like new sabers, I think.
So she just made entirely new sabers.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So,
because again, they're white for a reason. Because remember that's canon. That dumb shit.
Yep. Healing the red kyber crystals. You've got now white sabers. So okay, so that makes sense then. They're just entirely new sabers. I was about to say I haven't actually gone back and like looked and made the comparison, but so anyway, that's basically the conceit there. She's now geared up with her lightsabers. They sort of charge into Mandalore, and this is what's really cool. As they're kind of coming down into the atmosphere of Mandalore, of course, there's all this bullshit, like the Prime Minister there on Mandalore or whatever is like, you're breaking a fucking treaty. And Bo-Katan's like, I don't give a fuck about your treaty, basically. I'm coming
for
in.
You, motherfucker. Like,
yeah, I'm coming for you, bitch, basically. So this is where we first kind of see Ahsoka in action in this arc. And we see plenty of it as the arc goes on, but we're really getting Ahsoka just fucking is wrecking shop as they're coming into Mandalore. Not even on the ground yet, like in midair. As the Mandalorians are kind of attacking their ships, with jetpacks and stuff, and Ahsoka is just like bouncing from ship to ship, just like fucking taking care of business.
Mm-hmm.
It was so cool. That's another thing worth pointing out here, is that these episodes actually, the combat sequences in these episodes were motion captured,
and Lord knows you can tell.
You can totally tell. It just goes a long way. Like it just. Everything looks and feels so much more high quality and professionally done in these episodes. Again, even compared to like the other two arcs. Like I look at the other two arcs and I'm like, I just feel like more love and care went into these last four episodes.
The combat especially just feels more fluid.
Totally.
It flows.
It feels realistic.
Yep.
And they just did such a beautiful job with all that stuff, and I just think it makes it feel even more special. These last four episodes. Anyway, they kind of reveal as they sort of wreck shop. They kind of corner the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister reveals that Maul actually wanted the Jedi to come, but he wasn't hoping. He wasn't counting on them sending Ahsoka. He was hoping to trap Obi-Wan. Basically.
But even then you find out
find out more.
More. No.
So anyway, they go down to the tunnels looking for Maul. When they, as this is all being revealed, it's like Ahsoka and some of the 501st.
So I think it's some random, he just ends up dying. It's like Captain Vaughn or some shit.
Yeah, something like that. But they get ambushed by Maul's Mandalorians, or the Mauldalorians as I called them.
Again, I appreciate that.
They ambush Ahsoka in the tunnels, and she actually ends up getting surrounded. Because they kind of go ahead and they all like get fucking killed, and like you said, that dude's dying basically, and she ends up getting surrounded by the Mauldalorians, and that's when, as the episode ends, Maul himself appears.
Big
and
Papa. No.
Yeah, and he walks in. He's like, I was hoping for Kenobi.
Mm-hmm.
I think as the episode's ending, she basically signals the rest of them to like bring backup.
Yeah.
So anyway, I can't remember if the episode ends at that point.
It goes actually a little further. Like they end up actually do come and actually start a little firefight. Then
right.
Maul escapes.
Okay, so the episode ends with Maul escaping. So before he does all that, though, Maul is actually even in that moment he's talking about Sidious, and he's predicting. He's like he's talking about his vision and his calculations, and he's like the Republic and the Jedi are about to be a non-issue.
Yes.
He's like, what are we even talking about this for? They're about to not even be players in this game. And he name drops Sidious for the first time, and I pointed this out. Like he was like scared to say his name.
Yes, well, that's the thing I actually really love is like you do see the fear when it comes to whenever he talks about Sidious.
Yeah, well, that's something that is always really cool and really played up in Maul's character and his story, is because like he was totally cast aside by Sidious, and
Mm-hmm.
he realizes that he was just a tool. He was just something to be thrown away and discarded. And that's such a crucial part of his character development.
He even says it about Dooku.
Right. He realizes that Sidious is just using pawns and replacing them with other pawns, basically, and he's behind everything, and he has a fear of him. That's just a crucial part of Maul's character, and that does come up even in this arc. But anyway, so that all happens, and I think that's after the escape. That's when the episode ends. I think the next episode 2, I believe, begins with Ahsoka kind of relaying some of this information to Obi-Wan.
Mm-hmm. And they did mention, they name drops, like, do you know anything about this Darth Sidious?
Right. And he's like, oh, I first heard this name from Count Dooku, basically. And he then is kind of revealing, and this is giving us, these episodes are giving us small touchstones of what's happening when.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're kind of able to place at this point where these events are happening concurrently to episode 3.
Yeah, essentially, like at this point, it took place right after the rescue mission with the Chancellor because Dooku's dead.
Yeah, he mentions and Ahsoka basically is like, well, why don't we fucking ask Dooku? And he's like, we can't. Dooku's dead. And so we know that this happens after that initial rescue mission in the beginning of episode 3. So that being said, he reveals to Ahsoka that Anakin has been kind of tasked with spying on the Chancellor. And it's funny because even Ahsoka is like, why would you ask him to do that? The Chancellor's a good man. The Chancellor's been like a father to Anakin and this, that, and the other.
It's like he's not going to like that. It's like he doesn't. He's not liking this shit.
And it's funny because like you sort of, and of course, Ahsoka is the perfect lens with which to filter this thought from. But, the Jedi are flawed. And the Jedi don't always make the right decisions. And Obi-Wan even says that. He's like, the council's not always right. And this is a through line that is felt and acknowledged throughout the entire saga.
Mm-hmm.
Even going all the way up to the sequel trilogy. I know that's a dirty word for a lot of people, but even going all the way up through like The Last Jedi, where Luke talks about the Jedi and their hubris and how they created Darth Vader ultimately.
Hey, don't let Sam Witwer tell you about rest.
I saw that. I was reading about that. He's like, Rian Johnson doesn't understand Star Wars and this, that, and the other. And
he went more into detail, but there's that's the clickbait titles people were using.
That's the clickbait title. I read the quote, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. I like Sam Witwer a lot, but anyway, Obi-Wan kind of acknowledges that, and he wants Ahsoka to talk to Anakin. Now, this was an interesting thing, because I mentioned this to you. He says, he's like, I want you to talk to Anakin or whatever. She obviously never gets a chance to.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a recurring thing in these episodes where Ahsoka gets a few chances to like leave a message for Anakin or whatever.
And she doesn't.
And I think that's totally intentional, and I'll talk about more of that as we go on. But yeah, she chooses not to, and she's like, no, I'll tell him myself when I see him. And obviously she never does. But
until their fated meeting.
yeah, until Rebels or whatever.
Yeah.
But so the question that I sort of had for you in this moment as I was thinking about this, I was like, I almost wonder if it were Ahsoka there on Mustafar. I bet you Ahsoka could have saved him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's something that I was sort of thinking about nonstop as we were watching these episodes. It's just just at the end of the day, this series is about 3 people. It's about Anakin and Ahsoka primarily, and it's also about Rex.
Mm-hmm.
But Anakin and Ahsoka are the chief. This entire series really is just about them and their relationship.
Yep.
And when you think about it, that's ultimately Anakin's got these 3 key figures in his life you could argue 4 maybe key figures in his life that he loses. The first is his mother.
Yep.
The second is Padme.
Yep.
You could argue maybe that losing Obi-Wan in a way. Even though Obi-Wan doesn't die, but he sort of loses his friendship.
It's a betrayal in Anakin's eyes at the end there.
He feels betrayed by Obi-Wan, and it's because of Obi-Wan's, alliance to the Jedi and his and the fact that Ahsoka isn't allied to the Jedi is why I think she could have been that push. She could have saved him, I think. And so anyway, that fourth person, once he finally loses Ahsoka, I think that's when you get Vader. I think those are the pillars of his character, and once they're gone, that's when you get Vader,
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, flash forward a little bit. Maul captures an ARC trooper named Jesse. By the way, what a dumb name for a Star Wars character, Jesse. I never get that. Like, some of them are. It's like some of them are kind of cool. Rex. I can kind of give you Rex. That sounds kind of Star Warsy. But then you start talking about Jesse and Cody.
All right, man. This man's just shitting on people's names.
The names are a little too normal. It's a little too like.
Would you prefer him to be called his CT-5997?
No. I don't mind the fact that they have names. I'm just like, they should be. They should have some Star Warsy names. You
want them to be named Fuckinator? Like,
yes. I'd prefer that to fucking Jesse. Anyway,
Commander Fuckinator.
Fuckinator signing in. So anyway, Maul's got Jesse. He's an ARC trooper. He's interrogating him. Jesse's like, "I'll never fucking tell you anything," and Maul's like, I actually wrote down the quote here because that was a cool line. He's like, "Your mind will speak or it will break." And this is when Maul starts to take a vested interest in who Ahsoka is. Because he's like, okay, why would Kenobi send her? Flash forward a little bit. Bo and Ahsoka have the Prime Minister of Mandalore locked up. And they're like, okay, let's see what this dude knows. Like, let's see. He's been in close contact with Maul. Let's see what he knows about all of this. Let's see if he knows who Sidious is, right? And he says like, oh, like Maul's never mentioned Sidious, but he's had visions, blah blah blah, and he's talked about Obi-Wan, but he's also talked about another. And right as he's about to reveal it, fucking Saxon, the Mandalorian, shoots him, basically assassinates him.
But before he actually dies, he does get the Skywalker.
Yeah,
out.
As he's dying, he does manage to get out the word Skywalker. So we see Maul. This is a little thing that I did see ahead of time. I did get this kind of spoiler. This is a very minor spoiler, but we see Maul kind of another like timeline touchstone talking on like holocom to the various syndicate leaders. Keep in mind, while this is all going on, Maul is still the leader of a crime syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talking to the various syndicate leaders, telling them to kind of go into hiding and lay low. We see that one of them is Dryden Voss,
mm-hmm.
from Paul Bettany's character from Solo, which was really cool to see. Cool to see Solo acknowledged at all, really. It's just a nice like little touchstone of like, okay, like they're not pretending like Solo didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I do hope that we see that storyline continued, and I think we will in some respects. I don't know when, I don't know how, but I think that eventually we will see that carried forward, and I do want to talk about the future in a little while. But anyway, it's unless I'm forgetting something, the next thing I have here is when they kind of go to the throne room.
Yes.
In Mandalore, and Maul's sitting there on the throne, which was a great shot. When they come in, they see Maul. His legs are all
up and shit like an asshole. Like he's like, yeah, stop.
He's basically sitting like fucking like Loki, Yeah. Like legs kicked up and shit like that. And Bo-Katan, goes to charge at him. He's just throwing the blaster shots off like no big deal. He actually, I guess, is something of a peace offering. He returns Jesse, who told him everything. Jesse's like, I'm sorry. He goes to Rex and he's like, I'm sorry. I couldn't help it. Like I fucking told him everything. And Ahsoka's like, it's all right. Take him back. Meanwhile, a full-scale battle is happening outside, and Darth Maul kind of looks over at Bo-Katan, and he's kind of like, you might want to handle that. She pops off, joins the fight, joins literally the siege of Mandalore, and it's just Maul and Ahsoka, which is what Maul wanted. He wanted them to be alone. And essentially it becomes that typical moment where it's like, we're not so different, you and I, type shit.
Yeah.
He's like, you were
tools for greater powers and shit.
Yeah, he's like, you were you were kicked out by the cast aside by the Jedi, and she's like, well, no, I left. And he's like, yeah, but like you saw their hypocrisy. And he's like, the same shit happened to me, basically. And essentially his goal is he wants them to team up and take down Sidious. And Ahsoka's kind of like, she's again mentioning the Jedi and shit, and he's just like, the time of the Jedi's past. Like, give that shit up. It's already over. He's like, I've already seen what's gonna fucking happen. Anyway, eventually, Ahsoka agrees. She's like, all right, let's do this, but first, what did you want with Skywalker? She's like, why was his name in your mouth, basically?
It's like, he's the key to all this.
He's the key to all this, and he basically says, like, I think he even straight up says, like, Anakin is going to be his apprentice.
Well, yeah, he ends up saying, like, Ahsoka at that point is like, what, the key to, bring balance. And it's just
right.
Like, no, to destroy it.
Right.
And then it's like, he's been basically groomed.
He's been
for
groomed
quite some time to be my master's next pupil, next apprentice and shit. It's like, damn.
Yep. Yeah, and he's like, I wanted to lead him here with Obi-Wan. I wanted to, like, kill him and rob Sidious of his prized pupil.
Because he was so sure of it. Yeah.
That's how sure he was of it. And, Ahsoka not wanting to believe it basically initiates a fight. And this is just a really cool, really cool fight. This is where, again, we get the mocap. And by the way, this is Ray Park actually doing the mocap work for Maul. And you just get... There's just something intangible about it when you're watching this stuff where, like, he just really captures that physicality of Maul when they're making a mocap. Because obviously, it's a very different Maul that we're seeing in Clone Wars versus what we saw in Episode 1. We just didn't get that much of him in Episode 1, but we did get that sort of really cool animalistic fighting style. He's like a fucking tiger, he's like a cheetah or something.
Mm-hmm.
He's like... His fighting style is so unique, and it was really cool that Ray Park did the mocap because it totally captures that.
Oh, it definitely did.
And that came through so clearly in the scene, and I loved it. And all the mid-fight banter, you're lucky Anakin didn't show up. Fucking
the way you're
he would have
fighting,
whooped your ass.
Last, yeah.
Yeah. I liked that. As the fight sort of rages on, I believe the window gets blown out.
So that actually happens before the fight starts.
Oh, so that happened first.
Yes.
So
that was a cool shot too.
That was a great shot, and it was a little bit of foreshadowing. I feel like there's a lot of like little moments of visual foreshadowing, and even audio foreshadowing, and I think this was one of them. Because spoilers, there's a very significant window shattering moment in Episode 3, and we do get reference to that later on.
Mm-hmm.
Which we'll talk about, but I feel like that was a little bit of a nod. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but anyway.
I think that's the writer in you, just like maybe stroking that shit. Just like, why is the sky blue? Well, no.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the sky, it's like poetry; it rhymes. Anyway, Maul ends up kind of escaping. Ahsoka gives chase and catches him, kind of like climbing up, and I think the battle on the ground is being lost by the Mandalorians. I think Saxon even like tries to contact Maul. He's like, "We need your help down here." And he's well, Mandalorian.
That's like, no, my ship's on its way. Die well. Fuck you. It's like, no.
My ship's on its way. Die well, Mandalorian. Some good shit. But this, as if the fight couldn't get any cooler, Maul is basically on this, like, what would you call it? Like a sky bridge kind of thing?
So, essentially, it's like a sky bridge. It's a bunch of just fucking, like pylons and piping and shit.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking no.
So she chases him up there, basically, and they, they fight again. It's such a cool fight because of all the abject danger just by where they're fighting at. What's really cool though is that like somewhere along the line, does he like push the sabers out of her hands?
I don't even remember how they lost, but she did lose the sabers.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what happens, but she does end up losing the sabers. And I love how she doesn't even back down for a second. She's like, fuck it, I'll beat your ass with my hands. Like,
this dead ass get back into a fucking fighting stance and shit. I'm all right. I see you.
just like, no problem. And so yeah, she ends up basically beating him, like, without the lightsabers. And,
he ends up, like, falling, and she grabs him with the Force, and then he gives me, without a doubt, my favorite line of all time.
Yes.
Let me go. Let me die.
Let me die. But she doesn't let him die. Rex on the ground floor. They see the fight going on. They go in to help, and he like stuns him and pulls him in, and they capture Maul. So anyway, next scene essentially, this is Maul's been captured. The mission is successful. Blah blah blah. Mandalore has been sieged, right? And we walk in on Mace Windu, Yoda. I think it's Ayla Secura and Ki-Adi-Mundi, right?
Yes.
And they're basically, it's like a scene straight out of episode 3.
It is dead ass a scene. It is essentially the scene. I actually looked it up as we were watching it. Somebody did a side-by-side.
Nice. Of them all sitting in the council room talking, Mace Windu's like, I sense a dark plot from Sidious or whatever. Ahsoka's kind of relaying the information. They've captured Maul, blah, blah, blah. I liked the little moment where they're talking about Anakin warning the Chancellor, and they suspect the Chancellor and shit like that. And Ahsoka tries to get involved. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Ahsoka." Basically.
No, I'm sorry, citizen.
Yeah, I'm sorry, citizen.
Then again, she did call herself a citizen first, I think.
There was some sort of dialogue moment where she was like, yeah, like I didn't do this for the Jedi. I did this as a citizen of the Republic, basically.
It's like, oh, I'm sorry, citizen.
But again, more sort of touchstones of the timeline. They do reference that Obi-Wan is on Utapau, which is where Obi-Wan winds up having that final confrontation with Grievous and everything in episode 3. So there's, again, a little bit of a touchstone there. Everybody sort of signing off at that moment, but Yoda kind of hangs around for a second.
Am I the only one Yoda looks so adorable in that shot?
He kind of does, yeah.
In a way. Like, he looks so adorable looking at. I was like, what the fuck?
They made his eyes kind of like a little too big. He looks a little like a lost puppy or something. And he basically asks Ahsoka, he's like, do you have more to say? Do you want me... Yeah, do you want me to leave a message basically for Anakin? And again, this is another moment where she gets that chance and she's like, no, I'll tell him when I see him. And then as she's leaving, Rex is like, wait, you didn't tell them about what Maul said? And she's like, no.
Nope.
No, I didn't. So, next scene, Bo-Katan is loading Maul into Ahsoka's ship in this like force restraining coffin. I don't know. Like,
I think we're essentially on the episode 3 of the arc now. I think
that's right. Yeah, it all
jumbles
blends
together. It jumbles together because it just flows.
It just flows so perfectly. It's hard to kind of place exactly where everything begins and ends. So, forgive me if I don't know exactly the start and finish points. But it just, again, this really does, I think, need to be viewed all at once.
Yeah.
I'm glad we did it the way we did it. Like just watching them all in one sitting, because this one, even more so than the Bad Batch or the second arc and everything, this one really, I think, needs to be viewed in one sitting. This is one cohesive story. Anyway, she's loading Maul up into Ahsoka's ship, and again, this is another moment where I'm like, this is a little bit of visual callback a little bit because he's breathing and it literally just sounds like Vader's breathing, right? And she's got him in this little like coffin or whatever. And there's a moment where Ahsoka's like, "Well, didn't your sister ban this?" And she's like, "Yeah, but we had this last one left. It's from a bygone era, but we did need a way to restrain you fucking Force lunatics, basically." And anyway, they kind of say their goodbyes. And it's really for the next few minutes, as we're seeing Maul being loaded up in the ship, we're seeing the ship kind of taking off. We're seeing various shots of these clone troopers that are leading Maul into his prison cell on the ship and everything. The next few moments are entirely silent. It's just the music, but you know exactly what's coming. You know that we are just minutes away from the big Order 66 moment, right? And I even mentioned this. I'm like the fucking impending sense of dread.
It's like we all know what's coming, and the music's not helping. It's just fuck.
The music is like going in. It's just this fucking just. I gotta shout out I think it's Kevin Kiner who is like the composer of this show. The way that his score works in these final 4 episodes. I mean, he just, again, you can tell this. People are saying that this arc is some of the best Star Wars anything, and they're not wrong because everything is firing on all cylinders. They spared no expense. Everybody put their heart and soul into this, and it's so obvious from the music to the animation to the story. Everything is just top level, and it's just absolutely. It's just fantastic what they've done here. And that, again, impending sense of dread. You know what's coming. You hear the music. It's fucking intense. Ahsoka and Rex kind of have this moment where Ahsoka's like, I don't want to be a soldier. And Rex is like, well, that's all we've ever known. The clones wouldn't even exist if it weren't for this war. And Ahsoka's like, well, at least there's one good thing that came from it, blah, blah, blah. They have a nice kind of tearful moment where they salute. It's another thing I wanted to shout out about this arc. I like that this arc made time. It would have been easy for it to just be balls to the wall.
Yeah.
But this arc did make time to have some quiet time, to give these characters a chance to talk. And I just
not time for Ahsoka and Anakin to talk. No.
Well, which just serves to add to the tragedy of it all, right?
Yep.
I really don't. I don't think that they could have done anything better with these last 4 episodes. It was just so brilliantly handled. Anyway, Rex is called away. He's like, "Hey, there's a briefing coming down or whatever." And Ahsoka doesn't go with him. She's like, "Go talk. Go handle it, Rex. You can go. I'm sure it's more good news." Well, we already know what it is. As Rex kind of goes out there and. As this happens, Rex leaves, and at the same time, Maul in his cell and Ahsoka on the deck of the ship there, they both feel a disturbance in the Force. And we straight up hear the audio from episode 3. This was so fucking cool the way they did this.
Yep.
We hear the moment that Anakin kills Mace Windu and essentially becomes Vader.
Yep.
We feel that fall. That is the moment in episode 3 essentially where boom, you've crossed over to the other side. There's no coming back anymore.
Well, there's no coming back from that now. It's like, yeah.
Right. There's no coming back anymore. You've crossed over. And they feel that. They feel that disturbance in the Force. And again, it's so cool that they played the audio.
And that actually does tie into, so like they actually cut Hayden's line at the end there with, I forget the name of the guy that voices Anakin.
It's Matt Lanter.
Yeah. They actually, at the end there, it is Matt.
Yes. Which is good. I mean, it's good for continuity's sake. You don't want to have, Hayden there. Anyway, Ahsoka rushes in. She's like, what the fuck? Something's wrong. And of course, as this is all happening, Order 66 is issued. Rex is kind of,
He fights it for a while. He fights it for a little minute.
He does fight it. He's shaking. He's not like immediately pulling the trigger or anything, but he gets out right before he sort of breaks, right? He gets out like, find the report on 5s. right? This was maybe my favorite moment. I got goosebumps even as I'm just thinking about it. Maybe my favorite moment in the entire arc here is Ahsoka Ahsoka just standing there. It's, of course, the music's in fucking full swing. It's emotional. Rex is fighting it. He's shaking. He's crying and shit. But then the clones all start attacking her. And the sheer precision of Ahsoka and the skill, and she's deflecting all these blaster shots, not harming a single one of the clones. She jumps through the roof and escapes, but then we realize that not only was she she didn't just cut a hole for herself in the roof. As she was deflecting all these blaster shots, she was actually using the shots to punch a hole through the roof for her to jump out of.
Mm-hmm.
What a brilliant scene. I loved that. Anyway, the next scene, as Order 66 is like in full swing, Rex is like, hey, like Order 66, we got to kill all the Jedi. Any clones that are fucking against this basically are also traitors. Kill them too. The next shot, they go in, 2 clones to release and kill Maul. Right. And that's when, because I'm glad they immediately touched on this. Really smart of them to immediately cut to that scene, because the first thought in my head as this was happening was, well, hang on a second. If Order 66 is to kill all the Jedi, then why are they attacking Ahsoka? She isn't a Jedi and hasn't been for a long time.
It's more so all Force sensitive.
And it's not only just it's all people who can command the Force and stuff, but also essentially Order 66 at its core is kill all people who can potentially be a threat to me.
Mm-hmm. This is truly, tying up all loose ends.
Right.
It's like, that's for sure. That's basically what Palpatine or, Sidious has always been about. That's why he's like, do it. Do it. For Dooku and shit.
Yeah, because Dooku knew basically everything, and said as much in Episode 2. So anyway,
he didn't know enough. No.
Ahsoka comes in, saves Maul again, not killing any of the clones. Makes it very. Was it weird to you at all, the disparity between she cares so much about the clones, doesn't actively doesn't want to kill any of the clones, which I think makes sense, but like when we're talking about Mandalorians, just slaughtering them left and right.
I mean, it's a different thing in a way.
I think I think the argument could be made that in Bo's mind, she's probably like, well, these are not my Mandalorians.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't care if you kill them. So Ahsoka would have no attachment there.
But again, these are the clones that she's fought with.
These are the clones that she's fought with. She has a special attachment to these clones. Anyway, so she makes it a point not to kill them. And she releases Maul. And this is actually a big point of contention for a lot of fans. A lot of people don't like the fact that she released Maul. I personally think that it makes perfect sense, especially when
in this time of crisis.
Right. Well, when she kind of explains why she did it, I think it kind of does make sense. I mean, so Maul comes out and Maul sort of realizes what happened. Maul, they don't really know what happened. What's that?
His ass was just brilliant.
Yeah, he realizes, he's like, brilliant. He's like, he has found a way to turn all of the Republic's clones against them. Like, he has found a way to fucking snuff them all out in one swoop. Maul is sort of like, why'd you release me? She's like, you're my fucking diversion. Go cause some chaos. It's what you're good at. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, are you at least going to give me something so I have a fighting chance? And she's like, I'm not rooting for you. Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, we get, Ahsoka then kind of sneaks into this bay that has some restrained droids, and she kind of asks for their help. One of them hacks into the secret files, basically, to find that report on Fives that Rex warned her about.
Yeah, and
And
talking about the inhibitor chips.
Yep, that's when she gets that. She gets we see the actual Kaminoan there talking about the faulty inhibitor chip inside of Fives, and learn about all of that. And Rex even suspected. We learned that Rex even suspected, like, hey, we have this inside of us, and this is part of something that we don't understand, right?
Mm-hmm. Something bigger that
And then we start to see like these badass scenes of Maul just defending himself with no weapon.
Holy shit.
This was just like prime badassery.
Dude, he fucking he's taking like metal panels off the walls of the ship.
Ripping the panels off the
decapitating
wall.
people.
Oh. Yeah, decapitating people, sticking them to the wall, like using them as shields. It was so fucking cool. So many cool Maul moments.
They've really done a lot of shit with Maul.
I mean, this show, between this show and Rebels, I mean, they've made Maul one of the best characters.
Yeah, Maul is probably the most flushed out Sith, basically, that we've gotten.
Yeah, that's probably fair to say, yeah. I mean, this is absolutely one of the premier Star Wars characters in terms of the ones that we know the most about. And a tragic character. That's the thing, is like, a lot of these characters are tragic. Anyway, cool scene. Ahsoka has that moment where the droid is showing like a hologram of her talking to Rex. And Rex is like basically like, oh, reveal yourself. And she's like, I'm right behind you. The droids stun him. Ahsoka carries him to the med bay. And essentially the goal is we want to find that inhibitor chip.
Originally, the scans can't find it.
This is a really cool moment because the scans can't find it. There are a small army of clones that are trying to open the door to the med bay that she's closed behind them. Eventually, what she ends up doing is she puts her hands to his head, and she starts saying what we heard Chirrut say in Rogue One. I am one with the Force, and the Force is with me.
Yep. And
she's repeating it. Eventually, Rex starts repeating it, and they find the chip, and the process works basically.
Mm-hmm.
But the way we know that, the door ends up opening and Ahsoka's, fighting off is...
I think there's a little bit of unease in that scene, though.
Oh, totally.
When he starts to... They give him the shot of he's, like, reaching for his gun and shit.
Totally. He's starting to come to. Ahsoka's fending off these clones. He's reaching for his gun. He lifts up his gun. He's shaking and stuff. You're like, oh, shit. Like, did it work or did it not work? But, of course, it did. He shoots down some of the clones and stuff like that. And he's normal now, basically.
I gotta respect how ready he was to actually defend her, though. As soon as he's back to normal.
Love it. That's totally his character.
Yeah.
Right? Anyway, again, in line with what she's been doing so far, she tells Rex to set his blasters to stun. She doesn't want to kill any clones. Juxtaposed to that, the next scene is Maul, who has made his way to the hyperdrive generator room. And he's just doing some boss-ass shit. Like,
just straight up just destroying everything.
Just dispatching these clones. I love how he actually takes the helmet off of one of them.
And throws a helmet at one. Like, just, fuck you.
So cool. What a cool scene. And essentially, he just grabs these two enormous generators with the Force and just sends them crashing down. And just completely fucks the hyperdrive. The ship ends up having to be forced out of hyperspeed or light speed or whatever. And it's now just kind of floating in space, heading towards a moon that they don't recognize, that we never even get the name of, I don't think. So anyway, the ship is kind of like heading straight towards this moon. And they have this moment where, and I think I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but there's basically a moment where Rex and Ahsoka are making their way to kind of figure out what's going on. They want to figure out, like, it seems like everything's in lockdown. I think Rex even has a line where he's like, everything's in lockdown. I'd be proud if they weren't trying to kill us. But Ahsoka is talking to the droid. She's like, hey, like, open up the hangar. Let's find a fucking escape shuttle, and let's get down to the planet's surface. And they open up the hangar, and an army of clones was just waiting for them the whole time.
It was simply a ruse.
Led by Jesse, by the way.
The ARC Trooper. No,
yeah. The ultimate nemesis of this arc, Jesse. So they have this moment, Ahsoka and Rex, where they're like, we're kind of fucked. Well, like, what are we going to do? There's a little bit of a tearful moment there, but Ahsoka's like, I have a plan. The plan essentially is that Rex pretends to have Ahsoka hostage. And he's like, cease your fire, blah, blah, blah. He's like,
again, it calls out the bullshit. It's like, well, there's a misunderstanding. She's not a Jedi.
Yeah, he's kind of making that case, right? He's like, brother, she, the order is to, execute the Jedi. She is not a Jedi and has not been for some time.
Yeah, and then again, Jesse even says, like, but bruh, you even said you had special orders to terminate Ahsoka.
We have special orders to terminate Ahsoka and any clones that do not follow Order 66.
Yeah.
So he's basically like not buying it.
Yeah, demotes his ass.
He's like, you'll be demoted, taken prisoner, and possibly executed, blah, blah, blah. And that's when Rex is like, I didn't like being commander anyway. Combat ensues.
Well, that's when the three musketeers of these droids.
The 3 hero droids, basically, who've been helping every step of the way, and they end up coming in handy because they're dropping these like landing platforms.
Yep.
And severely reducing the amount of clones in the battle and stuff like that. And meanwhile, Maul makes it into this hangar, and he's kind of trying to make off with the escape shuttle. He's kind of running towards the escape shuttle. Ahsoka is like trying to stop him. Maul says something to the effect of like, you wanted this chaos, you got it, bitch, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really cool scene where Maul gets into the shuttle and starts to take off, and Ahsoka grabs the shuttle with the Force. Now, this is something, this series and the movies and everything have kind of shown us time and time again that control of the Force to be able to do something like that is extremely difficult.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen how difficult it is to, say, lift an X-Wing out of the swamp. We've seen how difficult it is for, Rey in Rise of Skywalker to grab that shuttle, that eventually she ends up like exploding.
Well, that turned into a tug of war essentially between Kylo and
not
Rey.
Easy to do, and maybe the only other instance I can think of this happening is in Force Unleashed, I guess, when Starkiller pulls the Star Destroyer out of the sky, right?
That shit's baller. I don't give a fuck.
Which was cool, yeah. So I mean, this is all stuff that it's not unprecedented, but again, Star Wars has shown us time and time again that it is not easy to do. And again, we're seeing here in this arc I think I even said, I'm like, how fucking powerful is she?
Yeah.
I think that's something that this arc is really showing us is like, Ahsoka has been extremely powerful. And we've always known that she was powerful, but how powerful is she really? Anyway, especially when the chips are down.
She was trained by the best. No.
Yeah. So she's got her hold on it. Maul's trying to push the throttle on it. Rex is like, hey, like, fucking, there's too many of them. We can't do this. She ends up having to let go in order to save Rex. So that's how Maul essentially escapes and goes on to do all of his other bullshit. So
this other bullshit.
That's essentially how that's how that little thread is tied up. We've seen now how Maul survived. So to save Rex, Ahsoka, this was a really cool scene where she kind of sends her lightsabers out to her side, and they cut a hole.
Cuts a hole in.
Spins them around, cutting a hole into the ground. They fall down, and they sort of meet the other the other clones that were initially brought down.
Yeah, and then the droids send them back up.
The droids send them back up, and this is when tragedy, the saddest scene in the entire arc.
We need to pour one out for the homies right now.
Because they confront the droids. One droid was already shot at this point.
Yeah.
But then the other two were, the clones sort of found them and they gunned them down.
They gunned them down in cold blood. Cold oil.
In cold oil. It was actually really sad because you're like, damn.
That genuinely like made me sad. I was like, oh, you bastards.
It's fucked up. They find an escape ship kind of below decks. They're looking around. They're like, fuck, like none of these are flyable. These are all for maintenance and blah, blah, blah. Well, they end up finding one. As this happens, they're being shot at this entire time. They're trying to defend themselves. Rex kind of makes a leap for it. Isn't quite making it, so Ahsoka pushes him.
Mm-hmm.
And Ahsoka basically gives him the push he needs to get onto it while she is defending. The ship at large begins to free fall into the planet's orbit.
It's essentially been free falling like the entire time.
It has, but now that it's actually properly in the atmosphere, now it's like the shit's getting real, where it's like nosediving, right?
And the ship actually starts falling apart. Actually,
it starts falling apart as it's kind of entering this moon's atmosphere and stuff, and the clones are all falling around and shit. Ahsoka manages to get purchased with her lightsabers and climb her way. To kind of start to climb her way up. The ship starts to fall apart, and Ahsoka is essentially darting through the debris and trying to make her way to Rex's ship, which eventually she does and grabs on. And the next scene that we see as the ship crashes into this moon, the next scene, it kind of quiets down, and we see Rex sort of coming up to the escape shuttle. He's sort of looking like he's sort of finished his business. He's putting away a shovel, and we see that Ahsoka, who is now wearing a robe, which of course we end up seeing her don again in Rebels, but it's a lot fancier and stuff. But it's cool to see her in a robe, like that in Clone Wars. Yeah. And essentially they have buried all of the clones from the wreckage and made a memorial to them. Not unlike what they do in Real War, where they have the guns propping up the helmets. Very similar to what they do in actual war. And so you just see like all these clones buried in the snow. And as a last kind of action, it's all really beautiful, and the music is great. And you just, again, you get that final just sense of how much she really did care for these clones. And her last action, she has the lightsaber in her hand, and she drops it into the snow.
Mm-hmm. Technically, it wasn't snowing. Not with her.
No, I guess not. I guess it wasn't fully... There was snow on the ground, but I guess it wouldn't... Yeah. So, the last scene of the series, really, as we flash forward, it is now... They don't explicitly say how much further it is, but...
It's got to be a decent little bit.
It's got to be a little bit of time at least, because there is, it's snowing. A lot of the stuff is kind of deep in the snow now, and there are, we actually see fully Imperial stormtroopers and snowtroopers, and like an Imperial probe droid is kind of floating around, and we see Vader.
Yes.
And it was really cool because the way they have made Vader in this show here at the very end is they let you actually kind of see through the eyes a little bit, which you don't normally get to. You can actually see Anakin's face through the eyes, which I think was totally intentional.
I do think I do think like when he ignites the saber and shit, at that moment I do think he's like still a little bit of Anakin right there. So this is something that I wanted to talk about, because I think there's a lot to unpack just in these last 5 minutes. Because Ahsoka leaving that lightsaber, to me, I think you could read it as, like it was solidarity. That's her finally giving up the past. That's her, she buried herself with those clones, basically, right? That you could see it as that. I don't see it as that. The way I took it was she left that knowing that Anakin was going to find it. She left that lightsaber knowing that Anakin was eventually going to come and investigate that wreckage. And that was basically her way of leaving that message to Anakin that she never got to leave. Right? Mm-hmm. The message of like, I'm still out there. Which, by the way, I think is why she only left one lightsaber. Mm-hmm. I think that was her way of saying, I survived, I'm still out there, and one day we're going to have to settle this. That was my sort of takeaway from that. And
I think the argument could be made that I do sort of, first of all, I do sort of agree with you that I think there is a little bit of Anakin in there in that moment. But I think the argument could also be made that like he was kind of going to investigate that wreckage to tie up the loose ends.
Yeah.
To be like, if Ahsoka's there, I gotta kill her. If Rex is there, I gotta kill him, or whatever. You know, I gotta investigate this wreckage to make sure there's no loose ends that need tying up here. Right. But I do think in that shot there where he ignites the lightsaber and everything, I do think that there is a little bit of him there that is maybe a bit relieved and maybe a bit hopeful even.
Mm-hmm.
The final shot of the series is Vader
Beautiful.
walking away. It's so well done. Is Vader walking away and one of the Ahsoka painted trooper helmets in the snow, you kind of see Vader walking away in its visor until he eventually fades out of view. And that's the final shot of the series. And I just got to kind of tip my hat to to Dave Filoni and of course George Lucas, and I hate to ruffle your feathers there, salty fanboys, but you know who also was hugely important in bringing this show back is Kathleen Kennedy. Hate to break it to you.
She had nothing to do with it. No,
so I just got to tip my hat to everybody involved. I just thought this was such a beautiful ending to the show. Such an important show, just.
Here's the thing. The most important thing of this all is another check for Daddy.
I think this show just adds so much volume and flavor and context to the movies, to the point where if you watch these movies without watching this show, you've done yourself a massive disservice.
We said this in like the first time we sat down and recorded, like from the first arc, is like episode 3 hits differently.
Totally. It's like
it's gonna hit differently again.
Yeah, I mean it's like required viewing. You've missed. This is such an essential chunk now of Star Wars that you will miss if you're not watching. Now, the question that I have for you is, where do we go from here? There are a lot of people who are like, "Oh, Clone Wars could still come back." No, I don't think it's going to come back.
No, I think Clone Wars is done.
Clone Wars is
done. What I wouldn't mind seeing is I actually want to see more of Ahsoka's story.
Now, it's interesting because, again, we're seeing her. It hasn't been officially confirmed at the time of this recording, but, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. Ahsoka's going to be in The Mandalorian, Season 2.
And I don't remember if it was like there were talks of it or rumors of like them doing another like Rebels series, right?
Yeah, there have been rumblings for a little while that perhaps Rebels is gonna make a return.
With them actually looking for Ezra.
With them looking for Ezra as as Rebels sort of ended, that is sort of Ahsoka's involved in that too. Ahsoka and Sabine looking for Ezra. So we'll see. But I do feel like that does leave a little bit of a gap there, where I'm like, okay, there are more stories that could be told there. Now, in terms of what I want to see from animated Star Wars moving forward, I'm like, okay, the things that would be perfect for this is like, I really do think that we need to start touching on post Return of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little shocked actually that is not that ground for me is fertile, and I'm a little shocked that we have not expanded on that more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, let a little bit of time pass, start dealing with this High Republic stuff that Disney is dealing with now, and get the new movies rolling out and stuff like that. But I really do feel like at a certain point, after maybe a couple of years, maybe the next animated series should be post Return of the Jedi. What did these characters do after Return of the Jedi? That's what I want to see. I want to see the animated series that takes place between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens.
Ooh.
Like, I want to see that. I want to see these moments with Leia being pregnant with Ben Solo, and I want to see the conflict between her and Han, and I want to see, Luke with his sort of Jedi Academy that he started. This is all stuff, I want to see this.
Read the comics, bitch. No,
Well, the comics even don't really touch
I know,
on it
they don't
that
touch
much.
it. They don't touch on it that much.
So I'm like, this to me is like fertile ground for a new animated series. But whatever the case may be, whenever you want to create a new animated series, the first thing, just if somebody from Disney or Lucas is listening to this, the very first thing you need to do when you're creating a new Star Wars series is you pick up the phone and you call Dave Filoni. That is the first thing you do. And you do whatever Dave Filoni tells you to do.
He tells you to suck his dick.
And Dave Filoni we trust. Dave Filoni is essentially, in my mind, now that George is gone, the new caretaker of Star Wars. Yeah. I feel like. So, anyway. That's enough gushing out of me. I feel like I've covered most of what I wanted to cover. Is there anything you think we should talk about? Anything else as we're kind of wrapping up here?
Not really. We basically covered most of it.
Yeah, I think so. I just implore you guys, if you've not watched this show, it's required viewing. It is absolutely required viewing. And of course, is it perfect? No, of course not. Yeah, no show is perfect, but there is more.
Was pretty close. No, I'm just playing.
What's that?
I said Mandalorian was pretty close.
But they've just done such a great job. And this ending was so beautiful. And like I said earlier, there's really nothing that I think could have been done better than they did here. I'm extremely satisfied with this ending. Also,
can I just say that Vader looked really fucking good with this this animation design?
I love this. Yeah, I love the art style that we got in this. Basically,
Vader looked good.
Maybe it's just in my head, but I felt like these last 4 episodes looked better than the rest of them.
They might have, honestly.
I don't know. There was something going on there, and yeah,
there was some quality to that shit.
Yeah, it looked like a fucking movie. I mean, Vader. And again, when we get that last scene with Vader, he looked great, and the stormtroopers and the snow, it all looked great. And I'm like, what I want more than anything is I want, like I said, post Return of the Jedi in this style, in this Clone Wars art style. Don't do what you did with Resistance. I like Resistance more than most people, but that art style just did not work.
Shit.
It didn't work. Go back to the Clone Wars style and make a post Return of the Jedi, pre Force Awakens animated series. That's what I want. Anyway, enough out of me, Todd. Let's wrap it up. The Clone Wars Season 7, the final season, the show is over. So thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next time. May the Force be with you.